Thank you for joining us for another edition of ThriveCAST. So today we're diving deep, literally, into the world of trenchless technology with a company based out of San Francisco called Phoenix Boring. So today I have Roberto Zolante and Thomas Egan on the mic to really talk about how this company is revolutionizing underground infrastructure with this cutting edge, cost effective trenchless solution that's really changing the game for cities, for developers, and contractors. So, welcome to the show, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so Roberto, why don't you tell me a little bit about Phoenix Boring and what you do for the EEC industry and beyond?
Sure. Well, Phoenix Boring is a recap of an existing company called ArcFit, and Silver Trenches was the merge of those two companies. And our main goal is to reduce or drastically reduce the cost of the trenchless technologies to install pipe on the ground in a less disruptive way and increase the adoption by being a lot more cost effective, increase the adoption of this type of technology.
Okay, and so Thomas, what do you do for Phoenix Boring?
Yeah, I'm been learning a lot from Roberto, who started this whole operation years ago when he started Zilper down in Colombia, and even years earlier he'd been working on undergrounding and on boring. But I have been doing the estimating that we do and the project bidding, and I check the geology of all the different places we're going to go. I'm a geologist by training, so yeah, that's what we end up doing. We're both so grateful to be on here. No one usually is too excited about boring because it's literally boring, but it's I'm glad that we can get a little bit of interest. It's much appreciated.
Well, and I think that this is it probably isn't a new technology, but I think that you are making this technology more cost effective. So why don't you tell me about, what are the biggest challenges in making Trenchless, more cost effective for constituents and, government entities who want to go this way?
That's a great question. And Thomas, please feel free to jump in after I finish. The key problem here is that conventional trenchless technologies are very project specific. So they're designed for tackle a specific type of ground conditions or a specific size or a specific precision needed, like alignment precision. So if any of these things changes, you from one project to the next project, you probably will need a different machine for the next one. So that is a big problem if you want to make these technologies, widely adopted. And so that's basically our main goal was to, and from the engineering perspective, was really challenging how to make a machine able to tackle, for example, different range of diameters that you're installing it into the ground, and not only that, but most importantly, to handle any ground condition that you face out there. That's the most important thing, and that's a very cost driver of the trenchless technology, especially because as I said, one project and the next project, probably you might need another different machine with another different skill set, sorry, and knowledge, specialized knowledge to operate those machines.
Yeah, Roberto, you put it really well. In particular, I would point out that sometimes it's so specialized that a whole company will just do one type of trenchless. So, for example, horizontal directional drilling is one way you can install pipe underground, and there's many ways, as Roberto said. But you'll have whole companies, whole industries developed dedicated to this method. And so, when you're talking about these different methods and when they're appropriate or not, it's a big deal whether or not a method can work in a certain location. And as Roberto said, the cost savings that we can bring to the table is his great invention, which is a boring machine that can do more than one thing, and more than one diameter, more than one accuracy, all these things. It's actually a multi-tool. And the conventional companies that build this technology, you can see why they don't have any incentive to do that. Only one machine to rule them all. No, they'd rather have 100 machines that everybody has to buy each one, right? So by us having our own machines, which thanks to Roberto for designing them and for they're his babies, but by us having our own machines, we have really unique set of capabilities, and so we can do a lot of different types of boring. That's what we're excited to do.
So are you guys the only game in town that does this? I mean, because this sounds like it's kind of a new technology. So do you have any competitors in the marketplace, or are you guys kind of ruling the roost right now?
Oh, well,
Much please jump.
yeah, sure. I can talk a little about that because I'm the one who has been doing our bidding. We're certainly not ruling the roost. There is a lot of legacy technologies out there, and there's people who, really smart people are already working on these problems. So they are putting in installations that are difficult and they're long and all sorts of things already. But what we're really doing is bringing technology to the table here, and we're have our own machines and do our own projects. So when we see a problem or something we want to improve, we can do it right away. There's none of this. We don't have to go to a manufacturer and say, next year we want this. So I think that's where we especially lie, where we have a good advantage because we can adapt to a lot of these different projects. But yes, long story short, we do have plenty of people who are working hard and putting in pipe, and big companies and small all alike.
Yeah, they are normally very laser focused on one type of
Exactly.
trenchless technology, as Thomas mentioned. So they have to deal whenever they found they're unexpected, right? When they're drilling the ground and find something that was unexpected, it translates into delays. And what we makes us unique is the fact that with this machine on my background, we can change the boring mode to adapt to different ground conditions. So that way we can always drill the ground in the most efficient way and avoid any delays that other people have to deal.
Mhm.
So you guys were mentioning technology and how it kind of plays a major role in making Trenchless more accessible to cities and developers. What do you think is holding back cities to go more this way versus the traditional digging of a trench?
Maybe Roberto can answer this because he's always so this is a hot topic for Roberto.
I'm glad I touched on the hot topic.
There is one concept that I call the critical conversion depth, which is basically an imaginary line in which, or imaginary depth in which trenchless or doing that without a trench versus excavating becomes equal in price, right? So the deeper the installation is, the more likely it's going to be that trenchless becomes cheaper, right? Compared with open cut, because open cut needs to excavate all the way from the top, while in the trenchless installation,
It's
it
just kind of
doesn't
go under.
really is
Exactly.
affected with
Yeah.
the depth, right? So the deeper installations are usually straightforward for trenchless. Another situation which are straightforward for trenchless, the no-brainer is when you need to stop shut down a highway. If you need to do like a crossing of a highway or a river, those are situations in which you have no other options but doing trenchlessly, right? But going again to the where both things compete, which is regular installation and of course the deeper, the better for trenchless. But the key point is that if we can make that imaginary line, that conversion or inflection point between being cheaper or being equal respect in cost, respect open cut, we can, if we make trenchless cost effective, more cost effective than it's right now, we can lift that line. So in shallower installations, we can be still competitive.
Mhm.
That's the whole idea. That's the whole thesis.
So it kind of sounds like, I mean, it's almost like it sounds like it could be an investment up front, but in the long run, you're going to see an overall return on investment because you're cutting down on traffic delays, on roads shutting down, you're cutting down on the amount of time and the amount of tools that it's going to take to be able to dig these trenches. So it's really a long term cost savings. So if cities and developers can see that the upfront cost is heavier out of the gate, they're going to see a long term investment, a return on investment, if they continue to go this direction, right?
For
For
sure.
sure. Yeah. One thing you pointed out about cities and owners in particular, we work for cities, we work for water districts, we work for all sorts of kind of government agencies, some state, but mostly local. These agencies are the ones who are deciding whether to use trenchless technology or not when it comes down to Roberto's point. And oftentimes, as he said, they're forced to when we have to cross a rail line or whatever, they'll use trenchless no matter what because you're not tearing that up. But other times, when they have the option, we know those engineers could add more trenchless if they wanted to. But a big part of it is that the engineers' estimates are based on incomplete information and old information. They think this is $1 million tunnel when we're doing it for 500,000, just as an example. But that is a real situation we're seeing, and it's a big thing that's holding us back. How are we going to fix it? I'm not totally sure. Roberto suggested he's had success before in Colombia doing that, so I hope we can have success again. But so far, it's something that I think we need to have a bit of a bigger name, bigger profile for our technology. But we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys just have to tell your story, right?
Mhm.
And you have to prove the point with case studies that show that this is, proven technology that's going to show a long-term return. I mean, I know that I worked in government for quite a few years and specifically for water and stormwater. I mean, the amount of time and energy it took just to kind of get the program or the renovations off the ground was like mind-boggling. So if you can kind of cut out some of that red tape for whatever reason, this being, some of that collaboration, like why not, right? I think it's just about telling the story the appropriate way for them to get it.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, we have a good example of that of a project we recently won. About 2 weeks ago, I think we won this project. And as you said, things move slow. So we won't be doing this work for months still. It's not like
Yeah,
it's going to be next week, but
right.
but we just won this bid a couple of weeks ago, which is an interesting one to look at. It's in Manhattan Beach, a fancy town in Southern
Oh, yeah,
California.
Los
Very nice
Angeles.
town. I'm not too sad. We'll get to get a tan while we're digging that tunnel, as long as we're out on the
Yeah,
surface.
I love Manhattan Beach. It's awesome
Yeah,
to see.
it's a cute place. They are also, I guess they have forward-thinking engineers too. What a great town, because they've got it all. And they designed an interesting trenchless project. What they had before was a lift station for their water. It would actually, no, it's a sewer. This was a Manhattan Beach sewer line. They had a lift station for their sewer that was, lifting up that water from the water, worse things, from down low and bringing it up so it can bring it finally to a treatment plant. And they were reevaluating that because those things are expensive and they have to have power all the time, and a lot of
Yeah.
maintenance is required for lift stations. And they realized, hey, now with trenchless technology, which has improved in the last 20, 30 years, there's other methods. They're able to do a very deep bore. So instead of having to have a tunnel go down and then a lift station to go up and a tunnel to go down, they're just doing one really deep bore. Part of it's 45 feet deep, which is pretty, for our technology, that is pretty deep. But they're doing that for a pretty low cost and getting rid of a major piece of infrastructure, a lift station. So yeah, I guess in that
Mentioning
scenario,
and not to
yeah,
mention the cost of the maintenance cost related with the lift station. It's a thing that what happens if the power goes down? What happens if the pump just breaks? So when it's just a straight line and it's a gravity line, physics will do it for you. You
you
don't
don't
need
have
to
to
do
worry
anything.
about it again. Yep. And
Yeah.
so they're installing a clay pipe gravity line, and that's going to stay in the ground. And it's a very good, resilient piece of infrastructure, because what's going to happen to it? It's so deep under there that basically, I guess this is a good example of where trenchless is going to save a lot of money, and where when a city is thinking about it a little bit, instead of just rebuild the pump station, we have another option. Actually, we can use technology that's advanced and continues to, and we want to keep that advanced.
So do you guys I mean, I know AI is, it's a conversation in everybody's office space. Do you guys use any sort of AI technology to support your product?
Not really, but it's gonna be one of the things that we have in the table because this machine is fully electric. All the controlling signals are electric, and it goes through a PLC on the power pack, the thing that controls the machine. So that part can be automated in the future, in the near future. Right now, we're using a pendant control to control the machine, but we have the PLC part, so we can actually select between being automated or just manual control.
Yeah, to give you more color on that, typical trenchless machines are usually diesel engine run with a little auxiliary hydraulics. This is an electric hydraulic machine, and Roberto's got the exact right point. He forward-thinkingly designed it to have fully electrical 24-volt signals so that, yes, parts of it can be automated as we please, basically is the point. If we want to save a little time of our operator, who they're busy people and highly paid, we can do that with a little bit of automation. That might involve
So
someday soon, hopefully.
can we talk a little bit about, so all cities, counties, government entities in general are always looking to meet sustainability goals and green infrastructure initiatives. So is there any way that Trenchless can really help those cities meet that sustainability goal and those green infrastructure initiatives?
Roberto probably, he's nodding. I think probably yes. We've got a few good examples of that. We had one meeting we were in about Fresno and regarding the high-speed rail that was
Yeah.
part of the high-speed rails. Some of the various things that they've stipulated, which there's a lot, but some of the things they've stipulated is that there's zero emission construction to be done in portions of it, and they're considering extending that to make more areas require zero emission equipment, which is actually something we're kind of excited about because our machine can run off the grid, which you will not see a trenchless machine running off the grid. And you could even, if you had an electric excavator, this would be a zero carbon trenchless install. Yeah, it's
Oh,
a
good.
good
There you go.
it's a kind of a good thing to we got to get every one of these niches in construction because construction's like I think 12 or 14% of global emissions. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's only talking about the machine itself, which is electric powered, and this is unique. But at the same time, the fact of doing this trenchlessly have a less carbon print than doing it with the excavation for sure. And the environmental impact is huge when you have to excavate from the surface. Sometimes you need to cut trees to get your path for the excavators in the
Yeah, I would
installation.
also I would there's a lot of things like that. Trees, carbon sequestration of all kinds, you're pretty much ruining if you're going to tear up the whole ground because it's sequestered in the trees and the soil and everything. If you're going to rip it all up, you're ripping it up. Also, when they do open cut, almost never can you use the soil that you have as your backfill. You're going to have to bring in soil material to backfill, truck out the soil material that you just got, and all of that is going to be a really costly and environmentally costly thing.
I mean, and believe me, I'm not a financial officer by any way, but you just talking to I'm already seeing like negative dollar signs on a budget sheet because you're saving all of these extra, things that you need to do in order to get just the excavation through. So, I mean, I don't. So, do you think cities are adapting to this quicker, or is there something that needs to be done to help them really understand how evolutionary this is going to be for their long-term success?
That's a difficult question to
Mhm.
answer.
Mm.
There is probably not a one answer for that. I believe there is always things to be done, right? There are some things that can be improved. Regulations regarding the environmental impact of. So every time, if even at the same point, assuming that, let's assume an example where doing the project with Trenchless technology is a little bit more expensive, it should be taken into account the environmental impact around that, and that should offset that cost. So
Yeah,
that can be done with paying attention to the regulations or making a few tweaks here and there to make that more important. So that could
yeah,
Yeah,
be one of
for
the.
sure. Another suggestion I would make is that our bidding process is almost all low bidder wins. It's almost always how it works, which is
I
it has
know.
pros and cons, right? It makes for an efficient world in some ways, but in some ways it's tough. And I'd like to do more negotiated work, but especially what we do is not that way. It's mostly going to be open bid. It's federal funded. It's all public works. So, long story short, the unfortunate thing there is that yes, price is the king, and it's a bit of a race to the bottom in some ways because we want to be able to say, hey, we're doing this for the same price, but we're doing it zero carbon. And I think
Yeah,
that should mean something, but right now it means nothing. It does. No
yeah.
one cares. So unfortunately, that's one thing that I'd like to see cities be able to do. I think it might have some federal and state requirements too that that's the case. But if they could have that as at least a factor, similar to right now how they have like disabled and disadvantaged businesses that they'll
Right.
give benefit, yeah, that's something that could be considered.
Yeah, it definitely should. And I totally get where you're coming from. Again, working in government, usually 99% of the time, we would always have to go with the lowest bid.
Mhm.
However, if there was a company that was able to come in and really show a higher value because of the higher price, and it really made that justification, 9 times out of 10, if we took that to city council, they would usually approve it, even though it was a more expensive because of the differentiation between the quality of service, whatever it is that you're getting is much higher, so you're getting what you pay for, right? So
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
always discount the bottom dollar if you guys can really sell
yeah,
the fact that you guys have tremendous value over your competitors. I bet, and you can use that better in a way
yeah.
to tell the story. I bet you guys might be able to get through it. So there
Yeah,
are
it's a,
ways
it's a
to
good idea. I hope
sneak
I
through
hope we
it.
can. Yeah, hope we can. As we
Yeah.
and you get a little more, we get a little more recognition. Hopefully that'll help too as we kind of find our place here.
Totally, because you guys are new. You're new and you're new in this industry.
Mhm.
I have a question for you. Are there any sort of like financing or incentive programs available for cities and developers wanting to use trenchless solutions, or is it just, their budget from, the general fund?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you know, Roberto, but I don't know of anything that specifically targets trenchless technology. I know of a lot of federal grants that will come in for water and for sewer and for all these things, but they leave it to the discretion of the engineer when they're doing this design.
Yeah.
By and large, sometimes as I was saying, there's forward-looking cities that are a little more that way, and that, like you said, might be interested in not the lowest possible bid, but unfortunately not all the time. And yeah, as far as trenchless itself goes, I haven't seen such a thing, unfortunately.
So in Trenchless, have you guys seen any sort of like project speed versus traditional excavation? Is this a much quicker way of going about excavating?
It depends. That's the answer. It depends on several factors because, as I said,
Okay.
trenchless means that like when you talk about trenchless, then we should talk about okay, which technology. Every technology might have a different deployment time and will have a different setup time and execution time. So so it's difficult to generalize all trenches, but in most of the cases. Yes, it's faster than regular excavation. Regular excavation, as we explained before, you just need to tear apart and start excavating the trench. You need to demolish the surface if you have a hard surface. You need to get to the actual depth, and then you need to prepare the bed for the pipe and fill with a different type of fill out that, and then you need to rebuild the street. That will take a lot of time. So yes, generally speaking, it's a lot
Mhm.
more time consuming to do it using conventional
Yeah,
excavation
I
compared with
actually
trenchless.
I could use Manhattan Beach as a good example, don't you think, Roberto? Because that one it's 800 feet or something of pipe, and we're gonna install it in. I mean, how long do you think that would take open cut if you were doing that deep? I mean, it's unthinkable. We're gonna install it in a couple of weeks, and I think it's probably if you were attempting to do that project with
Months.
shoring, yeah, it'd be many months and a lot more
Months.
people for sure too. So and the roads would all be closed. That's the worst
Yeah, and I mean to inconvenience commerce, right?
part.
Especially in Manhattan Beach, where it's all very tightly
Hmm.
connected.
Not a lot
I
of
can only
space.
imagine the nightmare it would be to reroute everybody on these tiny little streets that, are filled with people who are parking their cars to go surfing, right?
That's a very good point because there is one of the factors that is not taken into account when comparing the cost of trenchless or open cut, which is how it's called the traditional excavation, is they don't take into account the indirect cost, which is all this time that other people have to spend to get to their jobs and the impact on the community there. That have a value, but it's hard to establish, right? It's in dollar amount, but
Yeah,
it exists for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That definitely makes sense. Long term, what are you hoping, or even in 2025, what are you hoping for Phoenix Boring to be at by the end of this year? What is your goal?
So I think our main goal is to be a much bigger company since we started recently. We already have 6 projects coming up here in California. We are already booked for the next 4 or 5 months. And our idea is to be booked for the full year, maybe
Yeah.
scale up and be like a virus, right? And start expanding geographically in all other regions, especially difficult ground condition regions. That's where we can provide the most value.
Hmm.
So, do you think that cities are facing any sort of issues with upgrading their underground infrastructure? And I mean, if that is the case, is there a way that Trenchless can help that and help them alleviate some of those issues when upgrading underground infrastructure?
For sure.
Certainly, yes. You're gonna get a yes from us. We're a biased crowd, but you're gonna get a yes from us on that. I would point to the Pacific Palisades where we had tragic fires, and there's
Yeah.
actually two different utilities issues going on there. There's water, which was running dry, and there's electricity, which was starting fires. And for us, we think about those two things having at least some component of a trenchless solution. In particular, distribution lines. Here in California, you'll have distribution lines going through the mountains, the driest mountains you've ever seen in your life, full of trees and all sorts of brush. and they've just got power lines going right through there. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and there's a big windy day, and tragedy happens. And so that's one thing that, PG&E promised they would underground 10,000. That's our local power line people. PG&E promised they'd underground 10,000 miles of power line. What have they done? It was like 2 years ago they promised they've done like 600 or 800.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, and it's a tough start.
They're way below their goal.
Exactly. And I also suspect that they're starting in the easier places where it's less important. We really need it in the mountains. This is where we need it, where it starts these fires. And so that's where we think we could help, is because our technology works for hard rock, it works for all these different types of material. And when we're in the mountains, that's the hardest conditions. So,
Yeah.
I think the first step is recognizing the problem, and they recognize the problem.
true, they did.
They're trying to fix that, and that they recognize they need to underground 10,000 miles, as Thomas said, of high power lines that are in very risky areas.
Yeah, that's crazy. So long term, what's your vision for making trenchless pretty much the standard in urban development? Like, how do you envision that happening in the long term?
So right now we are quoting using the standard rules, right? Like, and we are gaining traction, a lot of traction because of that. Again, a key point is that since we don't need to deal with the geological risk, we know that we're gonna have less delays that other contractors might have, and that puts our bid always 40% cheaper than the rest, or like in average. That's one thing that's our short-term strategy, right? But once
Okay.
we get bigger and we have better traction, I think that overall the industry will try to follow us and try to lower price. So on the long term, remember the line, the critical conversion depth that I
Right.
was talking about? I bet that over time that line will go up, and that's what our ultimate goal.
I mean, you're going to change the face of how government entities think about these large term projects. If the more you can educate them about the value of going this direction, which is amazing. So, what do you think? Is there anything else that you think is really critical to Phoenix Boring that government entities, people who are listening, people who are watching, really need to consider and think about when they're putting these RFPs together, RFQs together? Is there anything that you think that they need to include in those RFPs, RFQs, RFIs when before they send this out to bid that Phoenix Boring might have some insight on?
But I have one thing, which goes back to what I said. You better adjust how you think these things are going to cost, because they say, oh, we're not going to do it. It'll be $1 million. But if we're here doing it for 400,000, we want to do it. That's what I would say to them. Is, hey, give it a second thought. Think about putting a little trenchless alignment in, because it might be cheaper than you think. A lot cheaper.
Yeah, a lot cheaper. That's
At least
amazing.
adding the option to say
Yeah.
this has been designed for open cut, but Trenchless is also allowed. If you want to do it,
Yeah.
just suggest how to do it and how much will cost, and that way we can jump in and start converting a lot of these traditional open cut projects into Trenchless.
It's a great idea.
Are you guys ever partnering with like civil engineering companies who are in charge of like developing and designing these roads prior to it going to a competitive bid? Are you partnering with any sort of civil engineering companies to kind of hit it earlier versus?
I think that's where we would want to be. But the problem is that on that pipeline, we are so far from those civil engineers. We've got engineers, and then we've got the actual owners, and then we've got the generals, and then there's us. There's a little bit of it's a little hard for us to bridge that gap, but we intend to. We very much do intend to. And Roberto in Colombia succeeded in getting his technology listed as a known standard technology.
That's in Colombia, as he said, my first approach when we were introducing this new technology, the first barrier was to explain that trenchless exists, right? Because a lot of these engineering companies are not used to, or they're afraid to design something that they don't really understand in detail. So the first thing I did was to offer free courses, trenchless courses. Like, let me give you a heads up of what trenchless is and which technologies you can find out there, pros and cons of each technology depending on the each project conditions. That open they start specifying more trenchless after that. So it is a process that takes time for sure, but I think it's worth it.
So where can people find more information about Phoenix Boring? What's your website address?
PhoenixBoring.com. Couldn't be easier. Please, yeah, reach out to us.
And where can they find you, Roberto? Where can they find you, Thomas? Are you guys on LinkedIn? Can they connect with you that way? Like, what's the
Yes,
best way to
please.
find you?
Absolutely. Or feel free to call the number or email on the website as well if you ever have any interest.
And are you guys only in California right now, or are you nationwide?
We are bidding on mostly California projects, but on bigger projects, we are working nationwide. And we have a couple of people we really want to work with that we're also willing to travel great distances for. We're going out to Maine even. So that's about as
Yeah,
far as it gets.
that's about as far as it gets.
We have a project. That project in Maine is particularly interesting for us because we are trying a different business model on that one. We are we are offering what we call machine as a service model, which is just providing the machine and a technician, and the subcontractor or the GC, the general contractor, will provide the rest. The rest of the team, their operator will teach them how to use the machine, and that could be a faster way to scale up geographically. So
Mhm.
that's something that we're considering.
Yeah, it also allows us to work in other states or anywhere. So yes, if you're in Maine, even if you're in Miami, I don't know, Hawaii, please reach out because yes, we're interested.
Interesting. Well, it's been great having you guys on this podcast, and I can't wait to better tell this story. And if you guys, the next time I have you guys on, I hope you have some really awesome success stories about how this has worked and how this has proven to be successful because I think that you deserve all the credit in the world for getting this new technology out the door. So, bravo to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do our best. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I hope we have good news for you.
Yeah, we'll have to connect later in the year and see how things are
Yeah.
progressing. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon.